The economic toll of port and rail inefficiencies in South Africa remains under sharp focus as a new executive is set to take over at Transnet. Industry role players have said that it will take some time to turn the tide at the parastatal. Audit Partner at BDO Siyabonga Mthembu discusses this with us. Thank you so much for your time, Sia. First, the state of the parastatal, the ports and rail systems in South Africa. Where do we sit in terms of that inefficiency?
Unfortunately to ESCOM, with Transnet there's been falling capacity, there's been deferred maintenance, and then obviously issues around cable theft, and then obviously management issues as we've seen with the resignation of a number of executive committees. I think maybe just to try and also just elaborate on this, if we look at 2012 where Transnet generated revenues of about 28 billion, and then they had spent about 3.4 billion, which is 12.4% on maintenance. There's been a significant decrease in the numbers if you look at their 2022 numbers, where they generated revenues of 38 billion. However, when it comes to spending relating to maintenance, that's significantly reduced to about 2.7 billion, which is 7.1%. So the thing is, some people may see this as a good thing, thinking that it's a saving, but the issue, it's not a saving, because as a result of the decrease in spending when it comes to maintenance, we're now seeing the issue that Transnet is faced with, where there's increase in infrastructure that is not operational. Secondly, also, if you look at then the advantage that, or rather the freight industry has taken advantage of this capacity or short of capacity when it comes to Transnet, whereby there has been a significant increase in the trucks on the road. Just to give an example again in the numbers, if you look at 2016, I think the trucking industry actually transported around about 617 million tons in terms of goods, obviously between inland and the ports. That has significantly increased by 35% to about 839. There's issues also linked to cable power shares. I think more than 1,500 kilometers of cable has been stolen, unfortunately, which is a staggering 1,096% increase in this theft. And obviously, then that has a financial impact. I think about 4.1 billion rand has been lost as a result of this.
Having outlined that, Siyabonga, the broader cost to the economy with these port and rail inefficiencies, what is it?
Yeah, so there's actually interesting, because there's a study which was conducted by the group called Gain Group, where they actually estimated that Transnet is costing the country about 1 billion rands a day. This is an equivalent of 4.9% of our country's GDP. Actually, to give it numbers like 353 billion rands annually. That it's cost to the country. However, that number doesn't obviously then factor in the lost revenue of companies which were not able to sell products, I guess, to the external customers, obviously because of the constraints that Transnet has in terms of shipping goods from inland to the ports as well as to the end customers. With that as well is the fact that SARS has also lost out in terms of revenue that they would have collected through taxes as a result of this lost sales. We see also an increase in retrenchments. Companies obviously not being able to sell, they're having to retrench more employees. And then government has also had now to divert some of the funds into the road infrastructure due to the increase of the trucks that we see on the road, them having to fix the road infrastructure, as well as obviously then the accidents that we've seen in the past couple of months. There's also then additional funds which are diverted to try and attend to those accidents, as well as obviously then the lost time. But I think what's very interesting with this, which may be difficult to quantify, is then the risk of loss of future investments into South Africa. Because the reality is international companies will not want to come to South Africa and invest if they know that there's a risk of after they've produced their products, they won't be able to ship it to the ports and also ship it to the end customer because of the constraints that we see with Transnet. So look, the magnitude of this is significant. Some argue that it is significant as the impact that Eskom has, and argue that actually this is even worse than the impact that we see as a result of Eskom and load shedding.
Now, a National Port Authority Board has been appointed by the Public Enterprises Ministry. What has been the reaction there in terms of the type of work that this board is meant to tackle?
Yeah, so I think what you've seen, obviously the board has been appointed, but then there's still an issue of the executive members that have resigned. As a result, then there's a process in place to try and replace those executive members. And in addition to that, we've seen this National Logistic Crisis Committee being formed. Look, I think it's a move in the right direction or in the right path. However, we just need to make sure that the people that are eventually appointed into these executive positions, it's people that have got the right skills. And there also needs to be a clear strategy in terms of what Transnet needs to do in order to move into the right direction. Also with that, now you've got a situation where you've got the government being the shareholder, you've got the National Logistic Crisis Committee, you've got the board, and then you've got the executive. I think there needs to be clear clarity, especially between the board and the crisis committee in terms of who's setting the strategy and also who's going to implement that strategy. Because again, we're going to have a situation where you find these parties pulling in different directions and nothing getting done, and finding ourselves in the same situation or even worse. But also what's very interesting about this National Logistic Crisis Committee is the fact that, look, one of their main focus areas is going to be looking at the restructure of Transnet, obviously to make sure that there's future sustainability. Now, when you talk about restructuring, then one wonders whether are we going to see Transnet following in the same, call it footstep, in terms of it being divided like we see as it's currently happening with Eskom?
As a parting shot on the latter statement that you make, where you reference the likes of Eskom and movements that we are seeing there, what's to be said about the role of private authorities coming into Transnet to assist or maybe even mitigate and form that public-private partnership that we usually hear of in rhetoric?
Yeah, look, I think it's very important that we have a private partnership, and I've seen it like now happening where there's a number of consortiums, especially in the mining industry, and it's also happening in the automotive industry, where companies are coming together, forming these consortiums, and then coming to Transnet and say, look, we want to assist because the impact of Transnet and its inability to provide the services that they're supposed to provide. It's not only obviously impacting in terms of the revenue that the government will be collecting, but it's also just impacting on the different businesses and the ability of the business to grow. So I think it's a positive thing, and from what I've seen, I think Transnet is accepting that. Obviously, then we'll see what happens once the executive members have been appointed, and obviously then the National Logistic Crisis Committee continues to perform as it's been set up to.
Thank you so much for your contribution. Siyabonga Mthembu is an audit partner at BDO, talking to us on the business desk this morning about the economic toll of the port and rail systems that are inefficient in South Africa.